It was supposed to be just another ordinary evening in the small town of Clearwater, Ohio. The sky had dimmed to that dusky shade where the last light of day lingers. The streets were calm, and most people were heading home from work or preparing dinner. But for Daniel Harris, a single father of a 9-year-old daughter, life had long stopped feeling ordinary. He lived with the weight of exhaustion, of responsibilities that never ended, of loneliness that gnawed quietly at the edges of every day. Yet all of that was about to be shaken in a way he could never have anticipated. On his way back from the grocery store, clutching a bag of food in one hand, he heard a scream. Not the kind of playful squeal of children, not the irritated shout of a couple arguing. This was raw, sharp, terrified. He froze for just a second, his pulse quickening. His eyes darted toward the sound, and what he saw made his stomach lurch. A young woman, maybe in her late teens or early 20s, was struggling against two men near a dark sedan parked at the edge of the lot. One had her by the arm, the other tried to shove her toward the car's back seat. She was fighting with everything she had, her face pale with panic, her voice hoarse from screaming. Daniel didn't think. He couldn't think. Something primal surged inside him. Part fury, part protectiveness, part memory of the little girl waiting for him at home. Without hesitation, he dropped the grocery bag, cans and fruit spilling across the pavement, and ran straight toward them. High voltage before I take you further into this story. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in standing up for what's right even when it's terrifying, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Hopeful Stories, and share it so more people can be reminded of the power of courage. Now, let's continue. As Daniel charged, the men turned in shock. They weren't expecting anyone to intervene, not in a quiet lot where most people kept their heads down. Daniel's heart pounded so loud he could hear it in his ears, but he didn't stop. He slammed into the man holding the girl's arm, sending both of them stumbling into the car door. The girl stumbled back, gasping for breath, tears streaming down her face. The second man lunged at Daniel, fists swinging, but Daniel met him with a desperate strength that came not from skill, but from sheer determination. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't trained. He was just a father who worked construction jobs by day and tucked his daughter into bed by night. But in that moment, every ounce of him was weaponized by the thought, what if that were my little girl? His fist struck clumsily but hard, and the fight turned into a chaotic blur of shouts, grunts, and the sickening thud of impact. The girl broke free and backed away, her voice shaking as she cried for help. The commotion drew attention. Lights flickered on from nearby houses, and a car slowed to watch. The attackers realized their chance was slipping. One shoved Daniel to the ground, snarled something under his breath, and the two scrambled into the sedan. The tires screeched, the car peeling away into the night, leaving Daniel sprawled on the pavement, chest heaving, blood trickling from his lip. The girl ran to him, sobbing. You saved me, she choked, barely able to get the words out. Daniel tried to steady his breath, brushing off the dust, his arms trembling from the adrenaline. He looked at her, frail, shaking, eyes wide with trauma, and all he could think of was his daughter's face. If she had been here, if she had been the one dragged toward that car, he shuddered at the thought. Neighbors rushed over. Someone called 911. The police arrived minutes later, blue and red lights washing over the scene. Statements were taken, descriptions given, and the girl, whose name was Emily, clung to Daniel like he was the only anchor left in the storm that had nearly swallowed her. For Daniel, the night replayed over and over in his mind long after he returned home. His daughter, Sophie, was already asleep in her small bedroom, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. He sat on the edge of his bed, the room dim and silent, but inside his mind the screams and the fight echoed endlessly. He had bruises across his arms, his knuckles raw, but what struck him most was the haunting thought of how close Emily had come to disappearing forever. Over the next few days, Emily's story unfolded. She had been walking home from a friend's house when the men pulled up beside her. She didn't know them, but she knew exactly what they intended. Fear had consumed her until Daniel's sudden intervention broke the nightmare apart. Her parents lived in another state. She had come to Clearwater to attend college, and now her world felt shattered. Daniel, despite his own struggles, found himself checking in on her. He would stop by the hospital where she was recovering from shock, bring her small things, soup, a blanket, even a sketchbook for her to write in when words felt too heavy. Emily's gratitude was overwhelming, but Daniel kept brushing it off. Anyone would have done the same, he'd say, though deep down he knew not everyone would have. Many would have turned their heads, walked faster, convinced themselves it wasn't their business. But for Daniel, life had been teaching him something ever since his wife passed away years earlier, leaving him to raise Sophie alone. When you're responsible for someone's safety, someone's trust, you don't get the luxury of walking away. You fight, no matter what. The weeks passed, and the bond between Daniel and Emily deepened. Not in romance, but in something pure, something built on gratitude and shared scars. Emily began visiting his house, helping with Sophie's schoolwork, even cooking dinners with them. Slowly, she found a piece of healing in their little household. And Daniel, who had long carried loneliness quietly, found comfort in knowing his act of bravery hadn't just saved a life. It had created new connections that filled the empty corners of his own. But the shadow of that night still lingered. The police were searching for the two men, but they hadn't yet been caught. Each time Daniel walked Sophie to school, he scanned the streets, alert, protective, his senses sharp. He knew danger could return. Yet instead of fear, what grew in him was resolve. He began attending community meetings, urging neighbors to look out for one another, to never stay silent when someone was in danger. His story spread, not because he boasted, but because others shared it. People began to whisper about the single dad who didn't think twice. Months later, the men were finally arrested after attempting another abduction in a neighboring town. Relief washed over Emily, over Daniel, over the community that had lived in quiet fear. Justice at last had caught up to them. Life didn't go back to normal for Daniel. It grew richer, more layered. He learned that acts of courage, even when terrifying, ripple outward in ways we can't always see. Emily eventually transferred colleges to stay closer to Clearwater, drawn to the family-like bond she had found. Sophie adored her, seeing her like the older sister she had never had. Daniel, once so weighed down by grief and responsibility, found that courage had not only saved someone else, it had reshaped his own life, giving him new strength, new purpose, and new hope. And yet, he never forgot the moment it began. A scream in the dark, a girl being dragged toward a car, and his decision to fight without thinking twice. Red Heart, if this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, and share it. Subscribe to Hopeful Stories so more people can be reminded of the power of courage, kindness, and second chances. Glowing Star's special request. Before we end, drop a comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. Because sometimes it only takes one moment of bravery to change not just one life, but many.